Good day, everyone, especially to my students at Tarlac State University enrolled in Human Rights Education. For today, we will be discussing social justice and human rights, especially as seen in the 1987 Constitution of the Republic of the Philippines. I am Ricardo Mariano, and I will be your instructor for today. Social justice and human rights according to our Philippine Constitution. This can be seen in some articles or sections in Article 13 of said Constitution. Section 1 of that Article 13 provides that the Congress shall give highest priority to the enactment of measures that protect and enhance the right of all the people to human dignity, reduce social, economic, and political inequalities, and remove cultural inequalities by equitably diffusing wealth and political power for the common good. Of course, all of us wants that for everyone to be equal. Okay? Gusto natin lahat tayo maging equal, pare-parehas lang when it comes to our social status, okay? To our economics or our finances, when being treated by the government, gusto natin pare-parehas lang lahat. And of course, that is one of the goals of these sections, to provide for such equality. Okay? To this end, the state shall regulate the acquisition, ownership, use, and disposition of property and its increments. So, the Constitution states that in order for there to be equality, the acquisition of property must be equal, or there must be regulations or limits. That's why we have different laws, diba? If you are familiar with laws on lands, agricultural lands, okay, there are certain limits wherein those tillers, yung mga magsasaka natin, they have a chance to own the land of their bosses. Okay, that's one of the goals na I think nagsasucceed naman when it comes to social justice. Although of course, there might be instances na medyo hindi ganong successful, such as issues in the Hacienda Luisita, you might say, na merong, yun nga, may mga naging issues, but nonetheless, in some places, okay, nangyayari naman ito. Okay, yung limitations or regulations in the acquisition of property, so that kahit papano, hindi man maging perfectly equal yung mga tao, pero at least they will live a decent life with dignity as stated in Section 1. So again, this is Article 13. Section 2 provides that the promotion of social justice shall include the commitment to create economic opportunities based on freedom of initiative and self-reliance. This means that although we are fighting for social justice, for equality, for the benefit of the poor, pero dapat base pa rin ito sa initiative and self-reliance. Meaning, kailangan may pagkukusa pa rin. Hindi naman pwedeng pantay-pantay lang lahat, tapos yung iba wala namang ginagawa. Of course, it's based on our initiatives and still self-reliance. Yung nakadepende ito sa atin. Kung tayo ba ay makikinabang sa social justice provisions ng Constitution at ng mga batas. Kung may gagawin or kung gagawin din natin yung part natin. So social justice is defined as the humanization of laws and the equalization of social and economic forces by the state so that justice in its rational and objectively secular conception may at least be approximated. Okay? So that's one of the common definitions of social justice, which is the humanization of laws. When we say humanization of laws, it means that although we have this saying, we have the dura lex sed lex, which states that the law may be harsh, but it is the law. But that is not always the case. This social justice can serve as an exemption to that principle wherein we try also to humanize. Hindi lang yung sinasabi natin palagi na yun nga, malupit man yan yung batas, wala tayong magagawa. No. Social justice dictates na dapat we try to look into the law also, or the spirit of the law. Okay, na dapat makatao pa rin naman siya. Okay? So social justice is about that, the humanization of laws, and of course, the equalization in our society, in our finances, and the like. So the principal activities which the state is commanded to attend to in order to achieve the goals of social justice are the following. So we have already mentioned some of this, and these are the creation of more economic opportunities and more wealth. So meron naman yan, of course, meron namang mga opportunities para tayo ay umasenso. It's just up to us kung paano natin sila igagrab. Kumbaga, sabi nga, huwag iasa lahat sa gobyerno. Okay? Kasi meron naman ng opportunities na pinoprovide ang government. May free education, kailangan na lang nating pagtrabahuhan talaga. Okay? And the closer regulation of the acquisition, ownership, use, and disposition of property in order to achieve a more equitable distribution of wealth and political power. So we have already mentioned this earlier about regulating property. We have already given an example on how a farmer can own the land that he is stealing o yung sinasaka niya. Okay? Because of the social justice laws provided or anchored in our constitution. So now we go to human rights. What did the constitution say about human rights? So we have many sections on human rights in the in the Philippine Constitution, but we will focus the on Article 13 first. The Bill of Rights will be one of our last topics for this class. So Section 17 provides in its first paragraph that there is hereby created an independent office called the Commission on Human Rights, or the very known CHR. Okay? Very known, maybe positively or negatively by some, but still it's known to, yeah, it's basically known to everyone, or it should be known to everyone that we have a Commission on Human Rights, and it's not just like any other commission. It is a commission created by the Constitution itself, the highest law of the land, meaning it is a constitutional commission. Okay, and actually, it does not necessarily, if we may know, if we were to give an opinion, this is already a self-executing provision of the Constitution, meaning eto na sinabi na nung Constitution na merong Commission on Human Rights. That's why we are somewhat puzzled why nagkaroon pa ng specific law creating it, or kumbaga, let's say probably it's more of an act of formality. Okay, but it's already there. The Constitution already speak of the creation of the CHR. The commission shall be composed of a chairman and 4 members. Okay, so that is the composition of the CHR, 1 chairman and 4 members. So what are the qualifications of these persons, members and chairman? They must be natural born citizens, meaning they were born Filipinos, not naturalized. Okay, foreigners naturalized as Filipinos. That cannot be. And the majority of whom shall be member of the bar, meaning they must be lawyers. Okay, they must have enrolled in a accredited or in a recognized law school. Okay, must have passed the bar, must the bar examination, and must have enrolled their names in the list of attorneys. Okay, their term of office and other qualification and disabilities shall be provided by law. So this is understandable, okay? Of course, the Constitution is general in nature. Kaya nga maraming comments sa Constitution natin, bakit parang ang kapal masyadong maraming sinasabi. Kasi dapat sa Constitution, maikli lang. Kasi ano lang yan parang yun nga, it's the basic or the general law. Kung saan, dyan manggagaling yung iba't iba pang batas. Ang problema kasi sa atin, or probably what happened, is that dahil yun nga, there were accusations or accordingly, events of violations of human rights accordingly because of the disclaimer, wala tayong pinapanigan there were claims of violations of human rights during the time of Marcos. Kaya nung gumawa tayo ng constitution ngayon, medyo talagang maigpit. Kumbaga, sinabi na natin lahat doon kasi ayaw na nating maulit accordingly yung mga violation of human rights during the Marcos regime accordingly. Okay? So with that, ayun, medyo maraming sinasabi sa Constitution, pero ito tama ito. There are things na hindi nakasali sa Constitution na kailangan may batas. So dun papasok yung mga laws about sa human rights, Commission on Human Rights, and the like. Okay? So we have Section 18 was skipped because those are the powers and functions of the CHR, which we will be discussing later on. So the Congress may provide for other cases of violation of human rights that should fall within the authority of the Commission, taking into account its recommendations. So of course, the Congress, the senators, the congressmen, pwede pa silang gumawa ng mga batas na nagsasabi kung ano yung violation of human rights. Okay, na pwedeng i-handle ng ating CHR. Okay? And of course, that's already present, no? Kasi meron tayong mga batas na the rights under custodial investigation, di ba? So galing yun sa Congress. So ginagawa naman ng Congress yung kanilang trabaho when it comes to human rights enactment of laws. Okay? So of course, if you're to tackle human rights, we have to tackle the Commission on Human Rights, or the CHR. Okay? So what is this all about? So the CHR, or the in Tagalog, Filipino, Komisyon sa Karapatang Pantao, is an independent constitutional office created under the 1987 Constitution of the Philippines, with the primary function of investigating all forms of human rights violations involving civil and political rights in the Philippines. So we already know that. We already know that the CHR is a constitutional commission, meaning it is a commission created by the Constitution, not just any law. Okay? And we also know that it is independent, meaning hindi siya pwedeng pakialaman supposedly ng mga ibang agencies sa gobyerno. However, of course, reality strikes in politics. Kahit meron kang autonomy or independent ka, kung medyo ayaw ka ng karamihan, talagang talo ka. That is politics, di ba? Kaya nga there was an issue before na yun, magkano yung binigay na budget sa kanila, if I'm not mistaken, 1,000 for a fiscal year. Try to imagine that, ano? Although maraming nagbunyi kasi parang sabi nila, buti nga sa inyo, CHR, kasi lagi nyong pinoprotektahan yung mga kriminal, yung mga police officer, hindi nyo pinoprotektahan. But you have to think about it, ano? Kung bibigyan mo ng budget ng 1,000 yung isang commission, even a constitutional commission, anong magagawa ng 1,000 na yon? Makakabili ng 4 na rin ng bond paper. So yun lang yung meron sila. So parang although yes, that might have satisfied some people or many people, pero in our opinion lang, that's too much. Medyo naging brutal naman yon. Kahit saan ka namang pumuntang organisasyon, sinong mabubuhay sa 1,000? Lalong-lalo na ito, hindi lang naman siya organisasyon ng 3 tao, di ba? It's an organization involving the entire Philippines, di ba? So that's a little bit brutal for me, okay? But nonetheless, the CHR is, their function is investigating human rights violations, whether it's civil or political rights. You have already mentioned those before. Civil rights are those rights involving your relationship with others, while political rights are your rights involving your relationship with your government. Okay, your right to vote and the like. So again, this was one of our comments too earlier that the CHR was already created by the Constitution. So why need a law, okay, to create it again more formally? So this is that law that I was referring to, the executive order during the time of former President Corazon Aquino. So Executive Order number 163, declaring the effectivity of the creation of the Commission on Human Rights as provided for in the 1987 Constitution, providing guidelines for the operation thereof and for other purposes. So again, we have this law issued under the office of the president, because this is an executive order, declaring the effectivity of the provision of the Constitution. Ano? So for me, honestly, I think it's a little bit redundant, but nonetheless, yan naman yung ginawa na nila. So that's that. Okay, so let's have a little brief history of the CHR, or the Commission on Human Rights. So after the ratification or the approval of the 1987 Philippine Constitution on February 2, 1987, which provides for the establishment of a Commission on Human Rights, President Corazon Aquino signed such Executive Order number 163, as mentioned earlier, on May 5, 1987, creating the Commission on Human Rights and abolishing the former Presidential Committee on Human Rights. So it was not the very first organization for human rights. We have formerly a Presidential Committee on Human Rights. But take note, that was before a Presidential Committee, meaning it's under the office of the President. So it means there might be instances, okay, hindi ko sinasabing nangyari, that the President can control the CHR. Unlike today na yun nga, they are an independent commission, hence they are on their own. Okay? Kaya nga siguro, yan, nagkakaaway minsan yung CHR and the Office of the President. Okay? The commission was created as an independent office. Okay, we know that already. Mandated to investigate complaints of human rights violations, promote its protection. Kaya talagang yan yung ginagawa nila. Pinaglalaban nila na maprotektan yung human rights ng mga tao. Ang tanong na lang dyan is yun nga, kung lahat ba ng tao pinoprotektahan nila o certain persons lang. Yun yung question ng marami. Respect for and enhancement of the people's human rights, including civil and political rights. Okay? Excuse me. So we have here the logo of the Commission on Human Rights, just to give us a little idea on what they are fighting for. So of course, the bird or the dove bearing an olive branch signifies peace, of course. So that's one of its main goals, to achieve peace. Okay? While the pair of scales, of course, we know that it symbolizes justice. So just peace and justice. Okay? Kumbaga, in one of the animes that we have watched before, di ba? In Trigun, ano yung palaging sinasabi ni Vashtampid? Love and peace. Okay? Ito naman, peace and justice. Yan naman yung pinaglalaban ng CHR. Okay? So its mission statement: as the conscience of government and the people, we seek truth in human rights issues. As beacon of truth, we make people aware of their rights and guide government and society towards action that respect the rights of all, particularly those who cannot defend themselves, the disadvantaged, marginalized, and vulnerable. Okay? So, we are not trying to defend the CHR here, but if you will look at its mission, parang mas maiintindihan natin sila ng konti. Okay? Why? Because, as stated in their mission, they are the conscience of the government. Okay? Kumbaga, they look, the government and the people, of course. Okay? They will ensure that the government is not violating the rights. Okay? Ang ano kasi natin dito, when we say human rights din kasi talaga, most of these rights naman ang surely ang poprotekta dyan is the government. Okay, and sadly, again, not to be on any party side, pero aminin natin sa hindi. Academically naman talaga, even if you read books. Okay, of course, the many violation of human rights is committed by the government. Okay, kasi yun nga, it's in the Bill of Rights eh. Obligasyon nila lahat yun. Okay, yung mga civil rights naman natin, yes, it may also be violated by other persons. Pero then again, yun nga, mas karamihan sa government talaga. Okay, again, we are not anti-government. Okay, we are just clearing that out. Okay, so with that, ayun, they are the conscience of government. So, more or less, yung titignan talaga nilang mga cases ay yung cases against the government. Okay? And of course, their mission is also to make the people aware and they will also guide our government to respect the rights of all people, especially those who are disadvantaged, marginalized, and vulnerable. So this is another reason. This can be another reason para makita natin na, talagang pinoprotektahan nila yung disadvantage, meaning disadvantage in a way na yung may hirap. Okay? They will not basically protect those rich people anymore because they are already rich, di ba? They can fight for themselves, parang ganon. Although not necessarily correct na bantawag dito na mag-focus ka lang sa may hirap, pero yun, nandun na tayo. The rich people, government officials, if we were to be honest, are medyo capable yan financially. Okay, so they do not, and being government offices or officials also, or employees, merong mga legal affairs office na yan, na yun na yung kayang magtanggol sa kanila. Kaya probably hindi na nakikialam yung Human Rights Commission. Doon na lang sila sa mga tao na wala namang organisasyon na manglalaban sa kanila, kumbaga. Okay? So its vision is a just and humane Philippine society of persons equal in opportunity, living a life of dignity and forever vigilant against abuse and oppression. So ganyan lang naman yung nakikita ng CHR. Gusto nila may hustisya sa bansa natin, okay, makatao tayong lahat, patas tayo sa mga opportunity na meron, basta yun nga, magsipag lang tayo, okay, mabuhay tayo ng may dignidad, at wag nating hayaan na ma-violate yung rights natin. Okay, that's the vision of the CHR. Okay, so its composition, we have mentioned this earlier, yun nga, we have one chairman, 4 members, natural-born citizens of the Philippines, at least 35 years of age, and ito yung bago dito, must not have been candidates for any elective position in the elections immediately preceding their appointment. So bakit may ganitong rule? Para iwasan yung mga partisanship o yung political patronage, di ba? Yung tipong may tumakbo, kapartido niya, again, just for example purposes, kapartido niya si President, natalo yung tumakbo, anong gagawin ni President? Dahil kawawa naman yung kapartido niya, i-appoint niya as member of the CHR. So again, hindi naman natin sinasabing ganun yung ginagawa nila, pero para maiwasan yung mga ganung pangyari, meron yung rule na nagbabawal na, kung kakatakbo mo lang ng huling eleksyon, bawal kang ma-appoint as member ng CHR. Okay? Member of the Philippine Bar, you all know, you already know that. Chairman and members of the CAR shall not hold during their tenure any other office or employment. So of course, this prohibition is about or to avoid conflict of interest para walang problema. Kasi nga naman, ano yung common saying nila, you cannot serve two bosses, di ba? Paano kapag nasa private ka, may business ka, tapos may CHR ka pa, tapos nagkaroon ng conflict doon? Kanino ka papanig, di ba? So para maiwasan na lang yun, yung mga members na ng CHR, wag na kayong maghanap ng ibang trabaho. Okay, dapat focus na lang kayo doon. Okay? Neither shall they engage in the practice of profession or in the active management or control of any business which in any way be affected by the functions of their office, nor shall be financially interested, directly or indirectly, in any contract with or in any franchise or privilege granted by the government, any of its subdivisions, agencies, or instrumentalities, including government-owned or controlled corporations or their subsidiaries. Again, a further explanation of the conflict of interest. So, yun, bawal yung ano man yung profession mo, whether you are a criminologist, a lawyer, an accountant, kung magko-conflict siya sa trabaho mo as a member of the CHR, so hindi pwede. Even if business pa yan, and even yung mga properties involving the government, franchise, or the grants, privileges, bawal ka. Because you are a member of the government, of course. Kumbaga kasi, pag member ka ng government, tapos nakakuha ka ng mga ganong privilege, parang ang dating, kaya niya nakuha yung privilege na yun, ay dahil member siya ng government. So, para maiwasan na yung mga ganong issues, so, binagbabawal na lang. Okay? What else? The chairman members on the Human Rights Commission shall be appointed by the President for a term of 7 years without reappointment. So, one time, big time, 7 years. Kung sakaling may matanggal at may ipapalit, yung papalit, ang term of service niya lang is yung unexpired term nung predecessor o nung pinalitan niya. So if ever, let's say for example, commissioner or member A nag-serve ng 3 years pero nag-retire, natanggal, whatsoever, pinalitan, yung pumalit sa kanya, ang years of service na lang na isa-serve ay 4 years. Okay, 3 yung nauna, 4 yung sumunod. Okay? The chairman and the members of the commission shall receive the same salary as the chairman and members respectively of the other constitutional commissions which shall not be decreased during their term of office. So yung about sa sahod nila, parehas lang daw sa sahod ng mga members and chairman din ng ibang constitutional commission. Ano ba yung mga ibang constitutional commission? We have the Commission on Audit, the Civil Service Commission. So those are the other examples of commissions created by the Constitution. Okay, and during the pendency of their office or their term of office, hindi pwedeng babaan yung sahod nila. Kasi yun nga, kapag ganun yung ginawa, parang act of revenge na siya or vengeance na, oy, babaan nyo nga yung sahod niyan para matuto, parang ganun. So, hindi pwede yun. Hindi pwedeng babaan during their term of office yung kanilang sahod. Okay? So, what are the CHR mandates? In summary, they are human rights protection, human rights promotion, and human rights policy advisory. Of course, when we say human rights protection, that includes yung investigations nga ng violation of human rights para hindi siya maging prevalent. Okay, para maparusahan yung dapat parusahan. Human rights promotion is of course involved in information dissemination, training about human rights. And when we say human rights policy advisory, it's about the watching the government if it complies with its treaty obligations in the different covenants. You have mentioned those earlier in our semester na meron tayong mga agreements with the United Nations, other countries. So isa rin yun sa tinitignan ng CHR kung nagko-comply ba tayo sa agreements na yan. Okay? Yan. So this includes the entire aspect of even monitoring and evaluating the performance of the executive or the enforcers, the president, the legislative or the Congress, the senators, and the judiciary or the courts to translate international human rights standards into national policies, laws, and practice. So they will make sure na nasang branch ka daw man ng government, mapayon nga sa side ka ng mga implementers, sa lawmakers, or sa courts. Yan. The CHR will ensure that you are complying with the human rights standards. Okay? So now we go to section 18 of Article 13, which I mentioned earlier about the powers and functions of the CHR. So we have, of course, investigation or investigate complaints about human rights violations. That is primarily the job of the CHR. Also, they will adopt operational guidelines and rules of procedure. Okay, so basically, gagawa sila ng mga sarili nilang rules in order to investigate how they will enforce the human rights mandates that they have. Okay, they also have the power to cite for contempt. Okay, kapag may mga nag-violate ng mga rules nila. Okay, that's a very powerful weapon, yung cite for contempt. Pag kumbaga yun nga, pag may hindi sumunod na kahit sino dyan, pwede nilang cite for contempt, but of course, mabibigyan ng penalty. Then, provide appropriate legal measures. So, basically, these are the ways and means kung paano protektahan nga yung rights ng lahat ng mga Filipinos kahit nasa abroad ka pa. Okay, legal aid, providing legal aid o yung pagtulong sa'yo in legal matters. Especially dun nga sa mga underprivileged o yung walang kaya na sinasabi nila. Okay? Who needs of kung saan yung mga taong ito na violate yung kanilang rights at kailangan nila ng protection. They can also exercise visitorial powers over jails, prisons, and detention facilities. Why? Again, of course, to observe if the human rights for even for prisoners or persons deprived of liberty are being observed. 'Di ba? Kasi kahit sila ay mga PDL na, kahit sila ay convicted na, may human rights pa rin naman sila na kailangang bantayan din ng CHR. Then they will establish a continuing program of research, education, information campaign para yon. Talagang respetuhin ng mga tao yung human rights through information dissemination, educating them, and researching na rin para kung ano yung mga magandang paraan. Then they can also recommend to Congress measures to promote human rights and provide for compensation to victims for violation of their human rights or even their families. An example of this measures to promote human rights or more specifically yung compensation dun sa dating Human Rights Act. Okay, if we are not mistaken, Republic Act 9372, the or older law on terrorism kasi bago na ngayon, di ba? So in the older law, isa naman ito nung in our PhD class, isa sa mga comment ng instructors and classmates ko, isang pangit dun sa batas according to them, na meron yung provision ng batas na kapag wrongfully accused ka ng terrorist act, okay, at kumbaga pag hindi na patunayan na ikaw ay terorista talaga, you will be given a compensation of 50,000 pesos. If I'm not mistaken, 50 or 500,000 pesos. So accordingly, yun nga, pangit yun kasi, yun, who will provide that? The arresting officer. Kaya matatakot yung mga arresting officer, okay, to investigate terrorism because of such compensation. But objectively speaking, tama lang naman. Ang ano kasi doon, kung 'di ba, ganun naman talaga ang criminal cases. Unless you are sure, talagang hindi mo dapat arestuhin kasi kumbaga we have the presumption of innocence, 'di ba? We tackled that in your human rights, presumption of innocence. So hangga't hindi mo kayang patunayan na he is a terrorist, dapat lang talaga wag hulihin. Parang ganun. Okay? What else? Monitor the Philippine government's compliance with international treaty obligation human rights. We have mentioned this earlier. Grant immunity from prosecution. So, pwede pala silang magbigay ng immunity dun sa mga basically offenders. Okay? Bakit? Okay? Para sa kanilang testimony. So, kung gusto mong mahuli yung mas mabigat na offender, immune mo yung mas hindi masyadong guilty, okay? Para mag-testify siya, ibigay niya yung mga documents niya, okay, na maging evidence, okay, para mas mapaganda or mas talagang matapos or maging successful yung investigation. Okay? Request the assistance of any department, bureau, office, or agency in the performance of its functions, of course. Pare-parehas lang naman silang nasa gobyerno, so dapat magtulungan sila. Or kami, if I may, appoint its officers and employees in accordance with the law. So they can appoint their own employees, di ba? So yan yung sinasabi nating independency. Hindi lang sila katulad ng ibang organizations, okay, na merong iba't ibang offices na mag-appoint pa sa kanila. Dito, sila, sarili nila, yung mag-appoint sa mga empleyado nila. But of course, still, in accordance with the rules or the laws. Okay, and perform such other duties and functions as may be provided by law. So of course, this is the catch-all phrase. Kung wala dyan sa mga nasabi yung gagawin nila, dito nila ipapasok. Perform such other duties and functions as may be provided by law. So this is of course based from Section 3 of Executive Order number 163. So I have mentioned this is also the same. Okay, basically the same with Section 18 of the Article 13 of the 1987 Philippine Constitution. So note, however, that the Supreme Court of the Philippines, in a case entitled Carino versus CHR, declared that the Commission did not possess the power of adjudication and emphasize that its functions were primarily investigatory. Importantly, kailangan nating ma-mention din ito. Anong ibig sabihin nito? It means DCHR is not an adjudicatory body. Hindi siya parang korte. Nagtatry ng facts ng laws, hindi. Para siyang investigatory. So more or less, para rin siyang a law enforcement agency conducting investigation. Okay? Pero hindi siya parang court na nagtatry ng kaso, ng facts, ng batas. Okay? So with that, if you have questions, you may comment, send me a personal message. There are many means for you to connect. You may do so in class. You may also for my students. But for now, thank you very much for listening and see you soon. Goodbye.